Hi, everyone, and welcome to Legal Management Talk, where we're covering every angle of legal management. Today, I'm very excited because our guest is Laura Richardson. She is General Counsel at Agiloft. And first of all, thanks for being here. Great to have you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here. I'm excited to do this.
Yeah, so I know you have a lot of experience on the corporate side, the client side, and what we're going to talk about today is really looking towards the future and how do you prepare for that as a law firm? And that's why I think your perspective is going to be so valuable because we focus so much on running a law firm like a business and how that's becoming more and more important. And when it comes to things like talent management, change management, and everything related to those, there's a lot of new ways of thinking that are coming around now. So first, I want to kick things off with talking about as we stand right now, and as we're looking ahead to what is coming down the road. What is one of the first things that, as law firm managers, we should be thinking about and looking to?
Yeah, I think for me, coming from that client perspective, the it's really about the kind of people that you're staffing to my matters really is important to the value of the relationship that I have with law firms, as well as the value of the work that those law firms are doing. And I know a lot of law firms have been investing in, innovation teams. They have like chief innovation officers and talking a lot about how to use AI within their practice. And I see a lot of that as being in the framework, efficiency, saving money, right? And offloading some of those tasks that are really well suited to AI. But one of the things that I haven't heard as much about is really about the importance of hiring the right talent for this particular point of time and the point of time going forward. Because the value in going with a law firm, right, is you have incredibly intelligent, focused people who are just really thinking about the law or legal services 24/7. And as AI and other technology becomes more critical to delivery of kind of world-class legal services, the kind of people that these law firms need to be looking for and training are going to have to be not just really good legal thinkers, legal judgment thinkers, whether you're talking about lawyers, paralegals, or whoever else a law firm is hiring, but you're also going to have to look for people who are really good at some of the more operational and technology parts of the practice, including, I think, more comfort with using AI in a creative way. And I know that there is this concern that when you're hiring or using AI, you're going to be depriving newer legal professionals of the opportunity to develop their judgment and develop their expertise. But on the other hand, clients like myself want to know that when I'm working with a team, they're really working for me in the most effective way they can, which includes embracing legal technology, includes embracing AI.
Right. And when you're looking at a firm and you're looking at who's staffing your work, what are some of the key things that you're looking for from what that firm offers and how they're choosing the personnel that is working on that case?
Yeah. I mean, I think like many in-house counsel that work with outside counsel, I have kind of criteria that I use, especially for big matters. And I have, to be honest, like RFPs that I use to ask for certain information. And part of that is like, who's the team are going to stop on this? What is their background? But one of the questions I asked in the last RFP I did was, how are you using AI internally? And what technologies are you using internally to create and provide efficiencies for the work that you're doing for my company, the company that I represent? And so for me, part of it is just like, I think you're going to see more outside counsel or more in-house counsel asking outside counsel as part of the RFPs, like, what are you doing? Be specific. But I think one step beyond that is how are you empowering your attorneys to use AI for this matter? How are you training them? And just really asking those questions and kind of being a little bit of, I mean, I don't want to call it a deposition, but I think that is the job of the in-house attorney is to really ask those questions and look for those ways that the outside counsel is bringing value. I think really good law firms are going to want to be able to easily answer those questions and show their clients, hey, we've really thought about this. And so I think the more that law firms think about talent within that framework of the moment that we're in and the moment that we're going to be in going forward, the more that they can easily demonstrate that value to people like me who are looking for it and want to know that I'm working with people who are thinking about AI holistically, including in talent acquisition. The other thing is you got to talk to people, right? A lot of times you submit the RFP, they submit the response, you kind of like do a couple calls with maybe the biggest partners. It's important from my perspective to meet more members of the team and make sure that you have that comfort and that trust in what they're doing, not just in their judgment, but kind of in how they interact, how they handle your communications, because I think that's another part of the talent consideration is how do you work with the entire team, not just the two, named partners at the top.
Yeah. And I think that speaks a lot to how you approach the hiring process of, people just out of law school, laterals, and kind of all the strategy behind that. And speaking of strategy and kind of mindset, you know, as we're seeing more of this new technology pop up, legal is pretty famously known for not liking change too much.
Yeah.
But I know that you use the phrase radical acceptance when it comes to looking ahead and changing that kind of mindset. Can you talk a little bit more about what that means and what that looks like in practice?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the legal community, we can get very entrenched in how things have been done and these so-called best practices. But obviously, when there is rapid technological change, much like early days of the internet, email, Blackberries, iPhones, etc., right? We can oftentimes fall behind because of that propensity to kind of look at what has worked. And so when I'm thinking about my own practices or how I'm running my department, I don't just look to the past or how other legal departments do it. I frequently look outside of that. I look into psychology. I look into how business units run. I look into different ways of running a business unit because to me, that's where I get a lot of inspiration. And one of the things that's really inspired me is this concept of radical acceptance, right? And we are in this moment of immense change, immense disruptive change to how we do work. And people are really afraid of the fact that AI might take their job, might change their job, and in some extreme cases, people are really afraid. And I understand why that AI will, destroy humanity. Okay. Like just going to the incredible extreme here. So there is a lot of fear. And fear tends to be something that makes us want to shut down, want to go backwards rather than embracing the moment we're in and really leaning into what we can learn from this moment, what we can prepare for the future, and how we can grow and how we do things. And so radical acceptance is just looking at the current state of reality and the potential future, right? There's all these different potential outcomes, and they might come faster or slower. They may happen, they may not. The AI may never take over, fingers crossed, and just accepting it for what it is and saying, okay, well, I can't control this. This is happening. And so all I can really control is how I react to it. And if I remove the fear part of it and I embrace the current reality and the likely future, then I can make more proactive, more thoughtful, more impactful decisions in how I deliver my primary value to the company, right? And how law firms support that value to the company. And so I think that's a really important part of it. And not saying that you can't be afraid or you shouldn't be afraid or that there's not a good reason for people to be afraid, but finding a way to process that fear so that it doesn't stand in the way of really impactful work.
Yeah. And there's so many practical uses of AI. And
Yeah.
what I've kind of learned over talking about AI so much is that, it's really, at least for now, only as good as what gets what it's told.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, would hope that any law firm that's using AI is not telling it to destroy humanity. So I think that, that hopefully is out of the realm of possibility. But,
Yeah.
smaller scale, it seems like there's a growing acceptance of its uses, But obviously there's still, as there I'm sure always will be, the holdouts who still want to be convinced about how effective it can actually be.
And I get it. I think there's been a lot of overpromising about how AI is going to radically transform our day to day. And all of a sudden, we're going to get all this time back and we're going to feel freed from the mundane. And that I don't think has really played out in the way that people hope and the timeline that they hoped for. Um, and part of that, I think, is, the natural part of kind of the technology might be there, but do we have the change management practices to get ourselves from our current state to where the technology is? And part of it is overpromising. Sometimes I think people release functionality or features and they're saying it can do X and maybe it will be able to do X, but at that current time, the most likely benefit that a customer is going to get out of it is somewhat smaller. So I do think there's reason for people to be skeptical. I think on the other hand, though, if you're not doing the work now, if you're holding off for it to be perfect, you're losing a lot of learning and the repetition that will actually help you be more successful when you get to that promised future state. And I think the people, the law firms, the individuals who focus on using it, on creatively using it, on integrating it into their work now, will see the best return on that investment when we're kind of at that inflection point of true automation, true, more natural collaboration with AI.
Right. And so you brought up change management, which obviously goes hand in hand with adapting to new technologies. And what are you seeing at the moment in terms of the best practices for change management and how firms should go about making sure they stay innovative and ahead of their competition?
Yeah. I think the lessons that we see in-house are really applicable anywhere on this, which is change management is not just a process of identifying the steps, the stakeholders, and the intended outcome, but it's also thinking through the challenges of that change in the environment that you're in. Again, going back to that radical acceptance part, right? Like you can want every person in a law firm to be excited and ready for AI. That is a wonderful thing to want. The reality is you are not going to encounter that. And so recognizing that in every change management plan, whether you're implementing kind of like low level AI solutions or kind of massive changes, you need to be considering the people that you are going to be impacting with this and putting in that behavioral part of change management into your plan. I remember just, pre-AI rolling out new technology at a law firm or in a legal department. You always knew that people were going to struggle with it. And it wasn't necessarily because they were not incredibly bright and motivated, but because they'd gotten used to doing something in a certain way. And so that was what was easy. That was like the grooves that they had kind of created in their brain that allowed them to be efficient. And so we have to remember that like even wonderful technology can sometimes create short-term inefficiencies if people have been really doing things in a specific way and gotten really good at doing that because they've created the pattern. And so thinking about ways in which you can help encourage and empower people who might struggle with that transition, not saying that you need to spend an inordinate amount of time on potentially the detractors from the technology, but recognizing that like you have an opportunity to help them and to create, if not a positive feeling about the change, a neutral feeling about the change. And I think that is part of what leadership always needs to be thinking about is, yes, the change management might be about technology, but ultimately it's the people that you need to help.
Hi there. This episode is brought to you by NetDocuments, the #1 trusted cloud-native and intelligent document management platform used by legal professionals worldwide. NetDocuments empowers law firms, corporate legal departments, and public sector organizations to organize, secure, and collaborate on documents effortlessly, wherever work happens. With built-in knowledge management, powerful automation, and AI tools, NetDocuments turns your document repository into a hub of insight and productivity. Learn more at netdocuments.com and find out how smarter work starts here. And I think a valuable way of of looking at it is showing kind of the strategic aspect, and how do we, especially when you're trying to influence the decision makers at the firm, how do we show that this is where we need to go to keep ourselves along the spectrum of afloat, profitable, number one in our practice area, or anything like that.
Yeah.
So what are some of the ways that when you're trying to convince senior leaders to adopt this kind of change, that you can really drive that point home?
Yeah. So I'm going to be kind of brutally honest here. You can lead a horse to water, you can't always make it drink. And so you kind of have to know your situation. And I think what we will see is people who might be in the position at a law firm or in a legal department, right? Or wherever, who are advocating for change, advocating for adoption, advocating for transformation, but they are encountering leaders or management that are opposed to that. And that to me is a mismatch. And in some cases, you can convince those people, right? I'm not going to say that it's a hopeless case, but in some cases you can't. And I think that those people who really are transformation leaders will be realigning themselves, voting with their feet, so to speak, and going to law firms, legal departments that are more transformation and innovation focused. And so I think the law firms that are not doing a good job of listening and being open to change are going to lose the people who could be the most helpful in their radical transformation. And the law firm leadership, legal in-house leadership that are more open to change, more open to these kind of innovation transformation leaders are going to ultimately be more successful. In terms of how, as an individual, you might be able to advocate for change to management, whether they are open, neutral, or more closed. I mean, it's the same way that you advocate, I think, for anything else in this business world, which is you come in, you have a very clear plan. You understand the investment and the return on investment. You understand the internal resources that would be required to execute your strategy. You have a very clear roadmap of what it looks like, what the costs are, what the resourcing is. And then you come with data. Data is a very, very powerful language in business. And I think the more that law firms and legal departments are run like businesses instead of being run more as almost professional organizations, professional associations, I think data becomes an even stronger way to support your point. And then the other part of this is the legal profession is about storytelling. And so part of the way that you can be the most impactful when you are advocating for change is to not just drop the numbers there and be like, see, look at how great this is going to be. It's X and then it's going to be Y, but telling the story about the data, about the transformation, about what it's going to mean to the company. And so I think those two pillars, data and storytelling, are incredibly impactful when you're trying to influence people who will ultimately make the decision on whether they're going to invest in this and at what level.
Yeah. It's like that classic job interview question of, where do you see yourself in 5 years, 10 years? And, it's something that you should be asking yourself about your firm. Where is this firm going to end up in 5 years, 10 years? How do we get there?
Yeah. And I think you will see shuffling, right? There are going to be people in law firms who are very reluctant to embrace this moment. And there are going to be people who are excited and ready. And I think people will move to the environment that suits them best. And I'm not saying that we can't survive in a world without AI. We absolutely can. People will still thrive. Great minds, great thinkers will always have a place in this world. But there's a lot of legal services that can be done more efficiently with AI. And as a person who has a budget, I have to think about that. I have to think about efficiency. It's one of my KPIs, right?
Yeah.
So.
Right. And again, when it comes to that that kind of thinking, there's another element of looking towards the future that I want to make sure we touch on, and that is something that is, I think, grown, has built up steam over the last couple of years, and that's the increase in the importance of the C-suite in law firm decision making and elevating people, especially people on the administrative side, to that executive kind of role to be sure that the firm is looking at things from all different aspects other than just practicing law. So what have you seen as you're working with firms and looking at firms of how the C-suite has played a role recently, and what kind of role should they be playing if they're not doing that already?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the ways that certain law firms have been signaling, hey, we are ready for this technological transformation, right, is the CIO. And I've seen a lot of law firms now have this kind of chief innovation officer role, whether it's filled by somebody who does have a JD or not, is absolutely one of the ways in which you can see that a law firm is at least signaling their openness to technological transformation as part of their continued value to companies, right? And to legal departments. So I think that's the most visible one I've seen. But I think to me, it's the C-suite is important because it shows me like where they're investing money and resources and at least emphasis. But what is impressing me more is how far down it filters throughout the organization. So if you have somebody at the very top and they're talking about innovation, they're talking about technological transformation, but then when you're working with other people at the law firm and you're not getting continuity with that vision, you're getting old methods, old way of working, and I think like fear or reluctance to use technology. To me, that is a title without a lot of power. So it's when I see a law firm and I'm seeing their C-suite reflects the values that I'm hoping to have come to me as a consumer. And then I'm also seeing it like throughout their entire firm. That's when I'm like, yes, I know what they're doing. I think what they're doing is great. And I believe in their future. So I don't know if that's super helpful, but I just kind of like do it parallel in the in-house world. I was reading this thing on LinkedIn the last 2 days, and I wish I could find it because I thought it was really interesting. But somebody was talking about how, like, what if the next kind of like great GC is not a lawyer at all? It's like a legal operations professional. And I know it was very controversial. I'm sure there were comments being like, "You're crazy. No, that can't be." But it did make me think like there's a lot of reasons in a modern legal department. You might ask yourself, is a JD really the best person for this role? Because, I didn't go to law school that long ago. I won't say how long because I don't know. I got to that age where now I'm like a little sensitive. That's fine. But we got no training on any of this. And I went to a great practical law school, UCLA, where they emphasize training that's not just simply, case law and whatever else. And yet I learned nothing about change management. I learned nothing about project management. I learned nothing about legal technology outside of like Westlaw. And I know that there's more of that now, but I think a lot of people at JDs lack that training and also lack, I'm not going to say curiosity about it, but their time is spent otherwise, right? And so I do think there's this amazing opportunity, whether it's in a law firm or a legal department, for non-JD, like people who don't have a JD, to take these leadership roles because frankly, they might be more skilled in running a law firm or legal department like a business. And to me, I think that is the future, is you're going to see a lot more of legal, not necessarily the legal work itself, the legal analysis, but you're going to be seeing a lot more of like what it means to run a legal business, whether it's part of a larger business or a law firm, being done by a wider range of legal professionals with all kinds of backgrounds and all kinds of degrees. And I think that's great. And I think it's like something I'm excited for because I learned so much from our legal operations team at Intel. And like, that's what got me into this. And I know I am a better leader and better at running a legal department because of what I learned from legal operations.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And a lot of what I've read too is that, while I'm sure things have advanced in recent years, a lot of people coming out of law school with very little actual practical knowledge of how to, do their jobs most efficiently with the latest technology, besides all the other business aspects of running a law firm. And I'm sure eventually, well, I don't know, I'm sure, hopefully eventually law schools will come around to address more of that. But in the meantime, why not have somebody who's not a JD step into that role and execute that vision most effectively?
Absolutely, because so much of this has nothing to do with substantive law. And I think a lot of general counsel and in-house attorneys will say this. Most of my day-to-day work has nothing to do with substantive law. It's about how I keep the business moving. It's about how I get integrated into the business and become the most impactful in the legal work that I do carry out. And I think, you know, law firms might recognize over time that there's a lot of work that they have deemed legal that may not be. And I think it's interesting to watch this play out because I ask myself, like, how can we keep the traditional billable hour? How can we keep these traditional structures, hierarchy, ways of doing business with all of this change? And I think I'm excited to see what law firms do. I'm excited to see how they innovate. I'm excited to see how they embrace this, the ones that do. And I know it will be by embracing more than just adding more JDs to their practice. They're going to have to. Yeah.
And just to leave us off, I know that we talked a lot about, managing talent and focusing on technology and everything that you need to do to adapt to the future. But it's still also important to remember that there's still people on either side of a deal or anything that your firm might be working on. And so you still have to remember the importance of making sure that both parties are, feel that they've been heard and accepted as you're doing business.
Absolutely. And I think this is the critical point, and one I'm so glad you brought up. Embracing technology does not diminish the need for human connection and relationship building. If anything, it enhances and increases it. Because as we rely on AI to do more of certain type of work, ultimately, the relationship is still really critical to make sure that there is understanding, that there is alignment, and that there is, frankly, like a good fit between the law firm and the legal department, between the legal department and the CEO, right? Like the human element actually increases in its importance as we go down this road. And so when I think, kind of circling back to the very beginning and talking about talent, when I'm thinking about talent and what we should be looking for is people who are really creative, really good at seeing AI not as this like scary black box, but as another tool where the more you kind of put in of your own creativity and your own judgment and your own thinking and your own humanity, the more you're going to get out of it. And this is something I see in my own use of just ChatGPT, right? The more I treat ChatGPT with respect and kindness and frankly, like some autonomy, the better the results are I get out. And I've like Googled this and I'm like, why is this? And I don't have an amazing answer for it. But I think that's like what's so funny to me. We talk about how an interview doesn't begin when you walk into the first door of your first interview, right? Your interview when you're applying for a job, interview for a job starts with your first phone call. And then it goes to how do you interact with every single person on your way in, right? And then, and it continues that. And I think when we're looking for talent that's going to be great at navigating the now and the future, right? It's people who are really conscientious, who treat others with respect, and who really embrace their own humanity while remaining, fairly open to the technological kind of transformation that we're in. And so that would be my thought about both the back end and the front end of this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Love to bring it full circle.
Yeah.
So thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate all the insight that you provided, and hopefully you're able to get some gears moving on how we're going to look to the next half decade and decade out from now.
Oh, thank you so much for having me here. And, these are my 2 cents. So take it for what it's worth. But, I just want to express I'm optimistic. I'm excited. And I think change, while it can be a little scary, is also an incredible thing to be a part of. And so it's been fun to get to talk it out with you.
Absolutely. And thanks so much to our viewers and subscribers for tuning in. Please be sure to give us a like and subscribe to our channel on YouTube. And you can find us anywhere you get your podcasts. And as always, you can learn more about ALA at alanet.org. Until next time.